Okay, can you all hear me on the microphone out there? All right, good deal. Well, thanks for having me today. My name is Bill Springer. I work for ILEAS, which is the law enforcement mutual aid organization in Illinois. We do a lot of things with coordinating law enforcement responses to various types of situations. One of the things we also do is interoperable communications, which is making sure that agencies can talk to other agencies. So I spent, I like to tell people I spent my 33.5-year sentence at the Illinois Tollway up in northern Illinois. And I retired from there in 2012 and ended up working for ILEAS when the FirstNet project came up, which is what I'm going to talk about. When I was at the Tollway originally, that's my first contact with GIS. And I never really realized how complex this was. I would just talk to the GIS guys and say, hey, I need a map and I need you to show these points. And there it was, right? It was really neat. The only thing I would work on was they'd give me like a PDF file that I had to distribute to my people. It was like a 35 meg file. So that was kind of, you know, getting used to that kind of a disconnect in file sizes was pretty interesting. And then when I started working on the FirstNet project, I had to gather a lot of information about various types of facilities in Illinois, like jails and hospitals and schools. And we had to map that out for the FirstNet organization to take a look at that. So I get some ArcGIS software and try and use that, and that was rough. If you've ever seen the movie 2001 at the beginning, right? I was like a caveman at the keyboards, right? Just banging away on it, nothing's happening, but I'm banging away on that thing. So I really appreciate what you all do because it's really a complex field, and I think in some cases, especially in public safety, sometimes it's underappreciated. So, okay, there we go. So what is FirstNet? FirstNet is, boy, this thing's just going, there we go. All right, so what FirstNet is, it's a nationwide LTE cellular network that's dedicated for public safety. The whole intent is that public safety users have priority on the network, so when we need to communicate, we've got the ability to get that data through. How many people have ever been like at a large event and tried to use your cell phone? Does it work? A lot of times not, right? One of the favorite stories we're told is when the Chicago Cubs, I don't know if you're a baseball fan or not, I'm not, but when they won the World Series, you couldn't even send texts in Chicago. That's how crowded those networks were, and any attempted public safety use on those networks was similarly blocked. That's what FirstNet is there to really overcome, is that congestion. So it does a lot of things. One of the things we try and get across to all the agencies is there's no requirement for any agency to use FirstNet. There's no rule, no law, no regulation, no nothing. That's strictly an agency choice. All we really want is for you to use the best network for your needs at your agency. The one thing FirstNet is it's not a replacement for walkie-talkies. The police radios and fire department radios that they use, this is not a replacement for that yet, and we'll talk about that in a further slide. So FirstNet follows something called 3GPP LTE standards. Those are worldwide standards. So your phone operates off of what they call the LTE standards, which determines how it works, how it sends data, how it sends voice, so on and so forth. There's also a public safety section to those standards, which is what FirstNet uses in the U.S. to provide the service. It gives public safety priority and preemption on the network. And that's really key because that's what gets the traffic through ahead of everybody else, is making sure that when you've got that big uh-oh going on, public safety has first crack at the network to get any kind of life-saving information through. So for a network like this, how would we use it? Now, I have a highways background coming from the tollway, so I kind of concentrate on these things as I go along. But snowplow management. I know IDOT has a program where you're actually monitoring your plow's location and what they're doing, spread rates, plow up and plow down, right? You guys are doing that? Okay. I'm sorry? But it's working along, right? Yeah. It's pretty handy use. At least you know you can transfer that to some sort of mapping where now a manager can look at that map and a green line shows that, hey, you know what? We've got the, we just plowed over there an hour ago. If it's yellow, it's been a while, or if it's red, nobody's been there for a while. So there's a lot of ways to present that information, but you need a network that can get that information through. So snowplow management is one thing, but dash cams. How many people realize that across some highways agencies in the U.S., they're actually putting police-type dash cams in snowplows? That's actually getting to be a thing now. How many people in here actually work for IDOT? Oh, almost all of you, really good. So you all know snow plows in the winter. The general public never collides with a snow plow, right? They never try and drive under the plow when it's up. That's never done, right? We actually had one when I was at the tollway. They actually tried to sue the tollway because somebody drove under the plow and peeled back the roof of the car. That went really well. But anyway, dash cam video. Currently, video is local. If you think about dash cams in a squad car, the video is recorded off the camera. It goes to a recording device in the back, and that's where it sits, right? With a network like FirstNet, you can actually remote access that video and see what's going on. In this case, this is a photograph from the Moore, Oklahoma tornadoes a few years ago, and that's an actual image from the squad car's dash cam. At the time, they couldn't do anything with that video. It was on the car. Nobody could see it. They didn't get it till later. When you have a FirstNet type network that can handle this type of video, now you can pull that off in real time, and you can actually see what the driver sees. Whether it's a tornado or road conditions or whatever, now you can start to see those sorts of things. And oh, by the way, while I'm thinking of a break, I've got sign-in sheets. They're going down that road. Could you start the sign-in sheet there? I really apologize for making you do the sign-in sheets. I'm federally grant funded, so, you know, you have to do all this paperwork. Never let people tell you the federal government doesn't produce a product. They produce paperwork in huge quantities, right? So if you could sign that, that would be really great. So dash cam video, being able to access that video remotely, whether it's from a dash cam, a body cam, a construction camera in a construction zone. How important is that? So you can see those traffic patterns setting up. That's one of the biggest things that Illinois has told FirstNet and AT&T about, who provides the service, is that video in the construction zones is hugely important. It's one thing to have video when you're responding. When you do traffic cameras, you're actually trying to do prevention, where you're trying to keep accidents from happening. And here's what we're talking about there. We actually experimented with these at the tollway back in the early 2000s. And you could pull that trailer out into a construction zone, push up the mast, set the camera up, good to go, right? We put those out usually in the middle of the night, so at 1 or 2 in the morning, you got great video, right? 1 or 2 cars a minute going through, looks great. But as rush hour starts in the morning, and nobody uses their phones when they're driving, right? They don't update their Facebook. They're not watching Netflix, right, while they're driving, not doing any of that. Anyway, when we tried using the commercial carriers for that, the video starts to break up as the day goes on. So right in the middle of rush hour, when you really need to know what the traffic's doing, you can't see it because the networks are too congested. And that's the sort of things that we try and do with FirstNet to get around that. Remote views of aerial imagery. Again, it's the same problem. You can download the video to the ground station who's controlling the drone. You've got that imagery right there, but getting it off site's really key. If you can start looking at flood footage in real time, that's really an important thing, especially if you're doing things like checking levees. So if your drone flies over the levee and gets a photo of a sand boil, if it's 3 or 4 hours later before somebody else sees that, what's the point? You're just getting a picture of why the area flooded. If you can see that in real time, you might have a chance to do something about that. And then there's video interoperability. If you have enough bandwidth, you can take a dash cam from a squad car and send it to the fire department. That's video of a propane truck. You've seen the ones with all the propane cylinders on it. Just had a collision. That's the squad car rolling up on the scene, and you got all the tanks blowing up, right? That might be something the fire department might want to see before they get into that mess. Of course, if they see it before they leave, maybe they stay in the firehouse when you see that thing happen. But it does give you the opportunity to be able to transfer this video around to different people as needed. So we're not trying to sell FirstNet to you. We're just a neutral advocate. By the way, FirstNet service is currently supplied by AT&T. They have a 25-year contract with the feds. Illinois, we have through DOIT, they've got a contract amendment for FirstNet service for state agencies, and also locals can purchase off of that. We're just trying to help the public safety agencies make the best decisions for their cellular broadband services. That's really the key. Again, there was no requirement to use FirstNet or use Verizon or use anybody else. We just want to make sure that for your agency, you do the best thing for your agency. So AT&T is providing the FirstNet service on all of our bands, all of their bands rather. They follow the LTE standards. Any AT&T device can access and use the FirstNet service. You don't have to buy a special device to use this. whatever phone that you happen to have, or that IDOT might have, or DOT might have, that's on the AT&T network can be set up for FirstNet service. All you have to do is whoever handles the accounts for your agency just has to let AT&T know this is a FirstNet phone. Probably doing that through DOT. So what we found is costs. Cost is the biggest thing. So I ask every agency this question, and I think I know the answer from you all. Do you have a budget that's really swimming in money? Right? Nobody else does either. It's fun to ask that question when you've got firemen and cops in the same room, because if you ask who has all the money, they do this. They point at each other. So, but pricing's a big deal. Pricing is probably one of the single things that cause people to decide if they're going to change their service or not. If it costs less, it's better for the budget, right? So the FirstNet services provided by AT&T is really competitive. I don't know what the pricing is, but it's lower than what you'd pay normally. In fact, it's lower than some of the state rates. They also, AT&T says they'll negotiate large quantity pricing. In Illinois, the state of Illinois is supposed to have the best pricing. And this just illustrates it. The big 32%, that's the barrier to wireless's costs. So coverage is another issue, right? If the network doesn't have a signal where you operate, you can't use it. It's useless to you. So coverage is a big deal. Now, in Illinois, Verizon has the upper hand in coverage. They cover almost all of the state. AT&T is catching up, though. They've been building towers like crazy. So how many of you have Verizon phones? How many have AT&T? Yeah, see, that's the reason, because AT&T doesn't have the coverage in the state just yet, although they're building towers, like I said, at a crazy rate. So the other thing that we look at with FirstNet, what we tell people is, how many of you have looked at a coverage map from a carrier? Pretty shiny, right? Outline of the state of Illinois, and it's all orange, or it's all blue, or whatever it is. You got coverage everywhere. That's not the reality. So public safety is used to what we call guaranteed coverage maps. It actually shows where coverage is, and more importantly, where it isn't. AT&T provides that information to agencies. The crazy part is they won't hand you a map. You have to have a salesman come out and show you the map, because it's considered competitive information. If you're looking at FirstNet service for your agency, ask to see the in-building coverage map or the indoor map. That's actually a worst-case scenario, because not only do you have to worry about the distance from the tower, you've got to get that radio signal to penetrate a building. And when you think about it, most of the time we're in an in-building situation. We're either in a building or we're in a vehicle, right? So you're always inside something. So in-building coverage is really key. Now, one of the things you can do is, if your agency is going to go on to FirstNet, you can ask AT&T to give you demo devices, and you can take them out and actually try them out. They'll give them to you for 2 or 3 weeks. What I would really say to do is make sure you test those out. Find the worst areas, find the creek beds, go under a bridge, really try it out. What we see a lot of times when people get demo devices, it comes in, oh, hey, that's pretty cool looking device. Set it on the desktop, and it sits there for 2 weeks. That's not really helping you test it. So get them out there and use them. Also, how many people are familiar with speedtest.net? If you get a demo device at different places, try and do a speed test. It's not scientific, but at least it gives you an indication if it's good or bad coverage. The one thing to keep in mind is the better signal you have, the faster the network is. And we're talking about bandwidth also. This is really key, because that's the amount of information that you can transfer from the field site back to where you need to get it to. So what is it? Is it Esri Collector? Do you all use that for remote data gathering? Right, so it's pretty commonly used. That's really bandwidth dependent. So if someone snaps a photograph and attempts to send the photo, if the network is slow, it's going to take you a while. You'll be standing there for a while that photo tries to get through. So the minimum FirstNet coverage is fairly slow. That's 3G speeds, although in most of Illinois, we have a lot better speeds because we're getting more and more towers as we go along. That was really cool. I didn't touch anything, sorry. I still think somebody in another room has a mic that's tied into this. Yeah. I've done that before, so I'm talking and somebody else is talking. Generally, the closer you are to a tower, the faster the speeds. That's just a general rule. Now, you can test before you commit. Again, get those demo devices and really try it out really hard. One of the things that ILEAS does is we have oversight over a lot of deployable communications teams, and we're building GIS capability into those teams. One of the things we found is we are advising any GIS person that's working with our teams. How many people have heard the term UCP or ITEX? A few of you? Okay, those are deployable communications vehicles. We actually, on those vehicles, we have a NAS drive that has about 100 gigabits of GIS information, various layer files and things like that on the vehicle. The reason is in some of these deployments, especially if, say, a tornado has gone through, you may not have any cellular coverage. So we have to rely on satellite. I don't know if you know what your speeds are at your workstation, but you're probably over 100 megabits per second while you're doing your stuff on the cloud. We are lucky to have 2 or 3 megabits through the satellites. So it's really important that when we have GIS people working with us in the field, they're self-contained. That wasn't me, honest. So again, you can test before you commit. Deployable assets. Us in the technology field, we call that the barnyard because they've all got these barnyard names. There's cows, there's sows, there's colts, goats. They all mean something, right? Sow is sight on wheels, cell on wheels, cellular on light trucks, so on and so forth. Deployable systems are really key because you can roll those into an area where something's going on, whether it's an emergency or whether it's a planned event, and you can add capacity or add coverage. AT&T has a lot of these on FirstNet. There's also going to be a number of deployable assets that Illinois will have under our direct control. They'll probably go on those ITEX and UCP vehicles. So if we roll out to an area like just had a tornado, we can put that on the mast of one of the vehicles, run it up, and at least have a little coverage bubble just to get us by, at least until AT&T gets there with some of their other deployable equipment. Now, the term QPP shows up a lot in FirstNet. That's quality of service, priority, and preemption. Currently, under FirstNet, the primary users are police, fire, and EMS, and there's also EMA and 911. Those have the highest priority on the network. Extended primary users are just one step below that. That's transportation, public works, public health, and things like that. So if the network's busy or overloaded, the priority users go to the top of the line. Preemption pushes them on the network and pushes somebody else out of the way. There's also something called uplift. So if you have a major blizzard going on and you've got all your IDOT trucks out there trying to plow snow, and one thing I learned a long time ago, if the roads aren't open, nobody's responding to anything, right? So in those situations, you can push the IDOT priorities up to the top of the queue until the blizzard is over. So local control is how you do that. These networks, though, are so smart and so quick in how they self-optimize. They actually have software built in there. They can determine by looking at all the users out in the field that we don't really want people messing with this unless they absolutely have to. There's enough capacity on these networks to take care of that. The problem is improper intervention by one agency can negatively affect everybody else. So if I'm in my agency and I'm the most important agency in the world, right, I'll just put all my people at the highest priority and just keep hitting the button. Well, pretty soon everybody else catches on to that. And the next thing you know, if everybody has priority, nobody has priority because you're back to the same deal, right? We also have what we call NIMS and ICS. That's something that we try and follow is how we plan our communications. There's a method to the madness on that. So push to talk. I'm talking about walkie-talkie here, right? Everybody's familiar with radios, right? You push the button and talk, you release the button to listen, right? So right now, no LTE-based push-to-talk system or service is considered mission critical. That is, if somebody's life depends on it, you really shouldn't be using an LTE push-to-talk system. They just aren't reliable enough yet. There's a whole host of technical reasons of why that is. The standards aren't fully developed. The sites aren't fully hardened. There's not enough sites to really provide that level of coverage. However, on day one, it might be good for some users, like managers and commanders and chiefs. They don't want to carry a radio everywhere they go, but you can port a land mobile system over to FirstNet and they can communicate between each other. So instead of your chief carrying a radio around, they can actually just take a phone and use the radio in the same way. Also, it might be useful for others. Think about like undercover investigators, right? They're usually pretty scruffy looking guys, right? Well, a scruffy guy talking into a phone doesn't look like much of anything. We're used to that. a scruffy guy talking into a radio, that's kind of a giveaway. So in some cases, it's a good idea to have this push-to-talk over LTE. But from my perspective, having looked at all this stuff, if I've gotten myself in trouble and I get one chance to call for help, I want my radio. I don't want to do it over a phone. So land mobile's here to stay. We're advising agencies to plan to stay on your land mobile systems for at least a decade, if not longer. What you are going to start to see is radios will have not only their usual radio workings, but also they'll have LTE built into them. So then the radio can search and find the best site. If the radio site makes more sense where I'm standing, it'll use that. If I lose that and go somewhere else and there's an LTE site, I'll go ahead and use that. So look for the hybrid networks and things like that. Applications management. I don't know of anybody who doesn't use an app these days. What FirstNet is going to do, actually AT&T is doing it, is they're providing a place for applications developers to build an app. And now they don't have to go out and try and sell this to each individual agency. It's available, it's referenced by AT&T, and now all your public safety applications are available in one place. FirstNet and AT&T are going to be vetting these applications. You want to make sure the app is really what it says it is, that it works properly, it's not inefficient on bandwidth, it's not a bandwidth hog, and you got to worry about security. So how many times have you heard about either on Google or the Apple Store, something is in there that isn't what it says it is, right? There's malware in it. You think you're playing Tetris and it's taken all your banking passwords, right? So they're checking out the apps to make sure that they're not malware. They're actually checking out who the developers are. It's not just checking the app, it's making sure the developers are not foreign spies and building apps that'll tear into the network. So they're tested for all sorts of things and they're vetted. They'll have a little seal of approval on there that says it's been checked and it works actually properly the way it's supposed to. I'm not sure if any Esri apps are going to fit that bill, although with as much as we use GIS in public safety and especially in responses like flood response, I would tend to think that some of those apps will end up being approved at some point in time. Bring your own device. So, been out of state government since 2012. Does IDOT allow you to tie your personal phone into the network? So they don't do bring your own device, right? Okay, just as well. We had it at the tollway for a while. What you find out is if you allow your network, your device to be tied into the work network, you lose control over it for security reasons. You may not be able to add apps. You may not be able to use the cameras, whatever the security policy is. My current device is tied into ILEAS's network, and I've got similar things. There's some things I can't do with my phone anymore because I tied it into the ILEAS network. So, but what we'll be able to do is think about volunteer firefighters or volunteer EMA people or small town, tiny police and fire departments. They can't afford to pay for any kind of cellular service, but the actual users may want to have that benefit of having prioritized service. What AT&T is allowing them to do is they can go into an AT&T retail store. They prove their identity through IDs. They vet who they are, and now on your personal phone, you can have prioritized service. Now, that's very good for the fire departments, the volunteers, the small agencies. What we've heard anecdotally is people will go in and want to put their entire family plan on FirstNet, so the kids can watch their Netflix prioritized. They don't allow that. Right? It's only for the actual first responders themselves. But security is a big concern with this, so they are careful about that. So interoperability, that's a big word. Everybody talks about interoperability and nobody really knows what it means. All it is making sure that when I need to communicate to you, I can do it when we need to do it with whatever devices we've got. So similar to cellular networks today, you can make a phone call from an AT&T device, whether it's on FirstNet or not, to a Verizon device or Sprint or T-Mobile or whoever. You can send texts back and forth. What you can't do is push to talk. So you can't push to talk from AT&T to Verizon and vice versa. It's just the way that they're doing it right now. There is a push in the public safety community to make them open that up because the standards don't stop you from doing it. It's more of a want to rather than I can't. So that's what we're working on with interoperability. But it's really key to make sure that we can communicate with each other when we have to. That's one of the biggest complaints you get at any incident is communications. And what's the biggest thing on communications is I couldn't talk to the guy down the street for whatever reason, whether it's the radio or an app or whatever it is. It's one of those things where we have to make sure we can communicate with everybody. And then governance, that's a boring subject, but usually you're talking about things like policies. And I'll give you an example. Video, we think, is going to be a big deal for public safety. The dash cam video, the body cam video is going to be huge. The thought is that whenever you're on some sort of an incident, your dispatch center could reach into your camera and start seeing what you're seeing, right? But people being people, they'll probably abuse that. If you're aware of body cams, you have to download the information every so often. Same with the dash cams. It's got to be taken out of the recorder and put into storage. Well, a simple way to do it is just have the video stream 7x24 from every device so we can archive it. Well, at some point, the network won't work anymore because there's too much traffic going on. So there has to be policies out there that say you can only access one of those cameras if somebody's actually on an incident. If they're just driving around on patrol or they're in the firehouse or whatever it is they're doing, don't access the camera. Only grab the camera video when you really need to do it. And it's policies like that that keep the network working properly. How many people have heard the term Next Generation 911? Oh, quite a few. Okay. There is a GIS component to that because mapping and location in the 911 field is getting to be a bigger and bigger and bigger deal, especially when you're looking at wireless devices. Right now, if you have a landline phone, how many people still have a landline? And I'm not talking cable. I'm talking actual copper pair from the good old phone company, right? I have one. I'm not going to give it up until they make them. The beauty of those is they know where you're at. When you pick up the phone and call 911 and say, help me, they can refer back to your exact address. With wireless, it's getting a little trickier because you're roaming around, and there's a whole lot more things that have to go on to get that information so they know your location. So that's part of what Next Generation 911 is about, is more information on the 911 calls. But it's really two parallel technologies. You've got FirstNet, which is voice and data between first responders and the dispatch center. And then you got Next Gen 911, which is the same types of information from the dispatch center to our public, our citizens, right? So it's two, there's a lot of confusion there. Which one does what? They're really kind of two separate things. One of the biggest things is start considering how is this going to affect how you operate in the field, and how's it going to affect your dispatch centers? Now, you have a dispatch center at headquarters, right? And you've got one at all of your district offices. So at some point in time, they're going to have the potential to start taking on more than just voice calls. You can get text by 911. That's actually a thing in a lot of places. You text 911, you type in, hey, I just had a car wreck or whatever it is, right? If you can text somebody, you can send files. You can send photographs. You can send video clips. What do you do with all that, right? How do you store it? How long do you store it? Who decides what you store? And then if I've got information in from my citizenry that's showing me a car crash, when do I send it out to my police officer or my truck driver or whoever's going to go out to respond, right? So if you have, let's say, an armed robbery, it's just going on right now, somehow somebody comes up with a photograph of the offender, when do you send that to the responding officer? Do you send it to him while he's driving 85 miles an hour to get to the scene? I mean, it's important for him to know who might be shooting at him, but do you want him looking at his laptop while he's driving, real fast to get there, right? There's a lot of policy and procedure issues that we got to work through. Same thing on the IDOT side. So if you've got a report of some sort of a pavement blowout or a bridge issue or something wrong with the pavement, you might have the general public photograph that and send it to you. When do you get it back out to your guys going out there to fix it? How does that work, right? So it's not the technology, it's the policies and procedures. What do you do and when do you do it? Unfortunately, we put our poor dispatchers in the middle. Dispatchers can be information overloaded today. It's going to get worse with this. And we may be putting them in positions where they have to make decisions that they're not, set up to make decisions for. There's going to be people that are going to send photographs of things that you can never unsee. Right? Never unsee that. Once that image gets in front of your face, you got it. It's in your brain forever. You can't unsee that. Do we need to do that to people? There's all sorts of various different, ins and outs and things that you got to worry about. One of the other things, working at the Tollway, I'm not sure if you guys get this, but we used to dispatch for state police. District 15 was at the Tollway, right? So as there would be a crash on the tollway, you've got people driving by. Well, you start getting calls. Hey, you know you got a crash, there's a car in the ditch. Hey, you got a crash, you know there's a car in the ditch. You might get 20, 30, 40, 50 calls, right? Then a trooper shows up, starts handling the accident. We still get the calls in the dispatch center. Hey, there's a crash, a car in the ditch. Did you know there's a trooper there? So that goes on. And then when the ambulance shows up, you get more calls, and then the tow truck. Imagine if people are sending you photographs, every 10th person snaps a photo of the crash. What do you do with all those? That could be evidentiary. You can't just get rid of it. How do you store it? Who makes that decision? Who looks at it? Do your dispatchers look at it, or do they just pass it off into another storage somewhere and let somebody else worry about it? Again, it's the things like that you've got to worry about. There's the potential for so much information that could be coming in from 911. Like you've got the crash photographs, right? That's one thing. You could send video clips out. That fine couple right there, you notice they're both carrying tools in their hands. They just committed a murder. They're getting ready to get rid of the body. That's an actual video, right? And then you got mug shots. My friend down there in the lower part of the screen, he's way too happy to get his mug shot. I'm not sure to what he's doing or what he isn't doing or whatever, but he's a happy guy. He's from somewhere in England. I don't know what he was doing, but he's a happy guy. But the deal is, who decides what we do with all this information? And who decides what gets sent out? There's so many safety issues. There's privacy issues. If you have something come into your dispatch center, you got to make sure it doesn't show up on Facebook, right? Because you can't undo it off social media. There have already been documented cases of, believe it or not, public safety dispatchers taking photographs of crash victims and putting it on social media and saying, hey, look what I saw today, right? Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. So, you know, there's a lot of things you got to worry about with that. So really what it comes down to for agencies is a whole bunch of decisions that you're all going to have to make to decide how you're going to use all this wonderful technology. You got to look at costs. You got to look at coverage, making sure that you have a signal in the area that you actually operate at, right? And making sure that this network is usable for you. You can look for demo devices. You look at things like features. Verizon offers a public safety service that's very similar to what FirstNet offers. It's not the same, but they're close. Remember, this is all determined by worldwide standards, so anybody can just turn the check boxes in their software on and off to make these things happen. There's also a lot of policy implications that you have to worry about what kind of information's coming in, what kind of information's going out. I've worked in technology, communications technology, for a really long time, and what I've found is usually technology can solve a problem. It's a good thing, but usually technology will cause another problem that you didn't anticipate, and that's kind of where we're at with FirstNet and next generation 911. So there's a lot of things we have to worry about with this. On the GIS side, I think this is going to be a big deal for your uses of, it's collector, right? My apologies for not having the right terminology down. Like I said, caveman at the keyboard, right? So it's going to have a lot of implications for what you all do in the field, how soon you can gather the information, especially if you're on an incident or an event, especially on flooding. It might be worthwhile to have people going out and saying, well, I'm standing in water. I'll click my device to say I'm actually in water. And you can build a picture from that, right? There's all kinds of information that you can gather from the field, but you have to have the network ability to get that in so you can actually use it. So that's what a network like FirstNet does, is get you that ability to get the network in, or get the information into your network. So for more information, there's a website, I don't know if you can see that, firstnet.gov. That's nationwide information. FirstNet.gov is the federal agency that oversees the FirstNet project. When we're talking about FirstNet, we have slang terms. .gov is the feds. FirstNet.com is AT&T. That's how we tell them apart, because everybody calls them FirstNet, and there's a huge amount of confusion. But they come out with stuff every few days on that site that tells you what's going on with FirstNet. They have all kinds of information about how the network works. They have a blog. They have news articles. They have all sorts of things going on. So it's really handy to keep up with that site so you can see what's going on with FirstNet. And if you got any more questions, that's who you contact, 217-531-0499. That's our project office. And they will put you in contact with somebody who might be able to answer your question. So for now, do you have any questions about the presentation or anything we just covered? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, a couple questions. Any idea why 3G, not 4G?
Oh, it's a 4G network, but in some areas where they don't have good signal strength, it falls back to 3G speeds.
Okay. And is this a dedicated bandwidth, such as will they bump other traffic off of that to get the first responders through, or is this a free-for-all?
Free-for-all. Yeah, no,
I say a free-for-all, but
I'm going to use that term on FirstNet and AT&T because sometimes they kind of don't give us the right answer. But it gets really complex because when the FirstNet project was started, the feds actually dedicated spectrum to FirstNet. The term is Band 14. It's a specific set of cellular frequencies that is set aside for just public safety, right? So as AT&T is building out Band 14, public safety has unrestricted priority on that particular chunk of spectrum. Today, on the rest of the AT&T spectrum, you have priority and preemption, but AT&T on that non-Band 14 spectrum has a way to balance that out so the commercial users aren't completely out in the cold. Public safety still has a priority, the primary users and the extended primary, and then of course the commercial users are down low, but they have a way to not push them off of there, which slows everybody else down. So once Band 14 is completely built out, and I don't know any percentages on how far they are in Illinois, it's a funny thing. It's supposed to be public safety's network by and for public safety. Sometimes AT&T, because of business secrets, and you can look at the initials of that to see what I really think of that, is not to tell you everything because they don't want to get that information released to their competitors. I do know they're building sites like crazy. They're adding Band 14 equipment to all their towers. I just don't know where the progress is right now. The other part of that is the phones have to be capable of Band 14 operation. I'm thinking just about every manufacturer on their current lineup of phones has Band 14 capability. If not all of them, quite a few of them do. So it's one of these things that's going to take a little bit of time to get there. But I guess the short answer to your question is, yeah, you do have priority and preemption, and it actually works. We've had people use it in, say, Chicago during different, like Taste of Chicago, and they notice the difference. So.
And the last one is, but I think you probably answered it, with the data throttling that AT&T loves to do. When you start sending that data video, have they made some type of promise to FirstNet saying, hey, we won't throttle this data?
It's funny because AT&T says verbally, we will not throttle public safety users. But if you read the contract, it doesn't quite say that. So what they do is they've got a plan they call it an unlimited plan. And how many cellular plans are really unlimited, right? None of them. But it's a finite resource. I get it. So you get, I don't know, it's 22 or 25 gigs a month of data under the unlimited plan, unrestricted. If you go over that, they don't throttle you. What AT&T will do, though, is if for 3 consecutive months, if you exceed that 22 or 25 gigs, then they reserve the right to put you into a different plan so you pay more. Because you're using the network a lot heavier than you normally would, but you never get throttled. What it then becomes is the responder on the ground, they're working just fine. It becomes a fight between the administrative people and the purchasing people is what that turns into, right? So a lot better than the throttling issues, because Verizon got a big black eye over that, I don't know, a few months ago in the wildfires in California. They're getting throttled. They can't use their devices in their command van. They call Verizon, well, no, you got to upgrade your plans for that. No! I'm sure there was a lot of frantic training going on in Verizon after that one. So, did get your questions? All right. Was somebody in the back raising their hand, or did I miss it? Or am I seeing things, which is not unusual? Yeah, go ahead. Up front here. You're so soft-spoken. You do need the microphone.
Question. So for your iTech vehicles, you're talking about GIS technology and getting the spatial information in the vehicles themselves. Do you have a plan for that, or is that something that's
something we've already done?
Something you've done.
We have in each vehicle. There's 22 vehicles. They each have a 1 terabyte NAS. It's a little bitty device. It's a RAID, so it's backed up, fully backed up, and it's kind of those are they vibrate, so it's a RAID with solid state drives. We've got, how many of you know a guy named Jim Quino? Yeah, you know him. We got that from him and Chad Sperry. Is that name ring a bell? Okay, so we got the information from those guys, and I don't even know what's in there. They just said, here's what you need. We put it on the drives, and periodically they're going to go through and re-update us so we add more data. Like I said, the key is that if you're on scene and there's no network, you don't have to tie up bandwidth trying to get something. Hopefully it's on the load on the trucks.
Okay. So they have an application installed for viewing the information as well?
At this point, we do not. Okay. We're assuming what we've been told is, and you can correct me on this. This is actually a good audience for this. When a GIS person goes out, it's like they're a gunslinger, right? They got their laptop and their version of ArcGIS or whatever it is they're using. They set it up the way they want it because it's easier for them to use, right? So I guess the question is, again, I don't know. So if you were to go to their desk and try and use their copy of ArcGIS, how easy or hard would that be?
It would be hard if I didn't know where their data was.
Yeah, stuff like that, right? So what we're doing is we kind of have it right now where a GIS person normally comes in with a laptop anyway, because it's what they're used to, and we'd hook up to our network and they could pull the data. We're looking at putting laptops. In fact, we already have the laptops. We're trying to figure out which plan to use, and Chad and Jim are working on that because we don't want to pay for a full-time license for 22 licenses on vehicles that get used, you know, not rarely, but on an intermittent basis, right? So we're still working that through.
So you're not using web services. You're actually loading the data on and using it from there.
Our assumption is that we have to be self-supporting. We have to be able to go into an area where there's no network, and satellite systems actually go out too. We did an exercise a couple of years ago, and we tried to use satellite, and it was a real snowy, wet, rainy day, you know, the miserable rain hard day. Couldn't get the satellites to work. There was too much attenuation to the clouds.
Does this interact with Starcom at all?
No. I mean, there's Starcom on the vehicles, but what we're doing with the GIS is two different things.
Okay.
So
you do have Starcom on the vehicles under FirstNet?
Mm-hmm. Well, they're two separate things. We have Starcom radios in the vehicles. They also have FirstNet vehicular modems in them.
So two separate things. Do they interact at all? Those two types?
As we're using them now, no, they don't really interact. Other than being on the same vehicle, that's pretty much about it.
Okay.
So, all right, cool. Any other questions? Good stuff. All righty then. Well, thanks for your, go ahead, yeah.
Is there any legislation coming for the E911, the next gen 911? Because I know that so many municipalities and county police departments that are, you know, going to be implementing this don't have the budget to do it.
Yeah, kind of outside of my expertise right there. Right now, in Illinois, they're going through what's called a consolidation. They're cutting down the number of what's called PSAPs. That's a public safety answering point. They're cutting down that number to about 1/3 of what it was to save money. So in most counties, there's a primary and a backup. Mm-hmm. They've altered the funding stream, and I don't know how all that works. You know, pardon my ignorance on that. The funding streams are a little more efficient, so I'm told they'll have a little bit more money for that. The feds have grants for that, but they look at how the states handle their 911 funding currently. Ever heard the term funding sweep? Mm-hmm. Illinois is one of several states that is not eligible for those grants because they sweep funds here out of the 911 budget statewide. So yeah, it's a mess. I'm with you.
Okay.
So I'm sorry, I can't bring better news, but yeah, it's just yeah. I think there's a need for it. I don't know how many counties have next gen operating in them. It's not all of them in Illinois, but you know, it's coming. And as technology prices drop also. There's a consortium in far southern Illinois, and there's one up in northwestern Illinois. They're each between 10 and 20 counties, and they all went in on networks. It was good financially because they were able to spread a lot of those costs. So, any other questions? Okay, well, thanks for having me out today. I really appreciate it, and thanks for having me. Thanks.